All right, everybody. I should be live. If I am actually live, let me know in the chat. And thank you so much for being here on another Monday night where we're going to discuss things that have happened during this previous week in order to kind of get caught up on everything related to preparedness and all the reasons for why we should be prepping for who knows what at this point. But thank you all so much. I see a lot of good people here in the chat, including Jet, who says 308 by Hot Chocolate Chip Cookies. What's up, sir? What is up to you as well? I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, we can do these live streams, get this information out there, and they have what you need when it comes to getting better prepared. So big thanks to Midway USA. We've got 5x5s flying in. We got Mr. Landfill, Harbor Prepper, Beretta Vandy. We've got Dave Sickles saying, hey, we got Twin Arrow Survival 2.0. Late again? No, you're perfectly on time. You're actually, we just started, so you are excellent. What's up, Magic? What's up, Libra 11C? Good to see you. We've got some really good people here tonight. So, post-collapse police state rollout, war update, and current SHTF examples. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and we need to talk about a little bit of everything in order to stay on top of where our priorities should be, right? And just keep in mind that this information should be used for you to formulate strategies as to what's becoming the most likely threat, what you should do in the sense of becoming better prepared for that threat, and everything else thereafter is something that you have to plan for. But this information is good to have so you can better prepare yourself for whatever may come based on what we're talking about, okay? So, Wooder Dude, 5x5, glad we are good to go. Now, I do want to clarify, I put out a video yesterday about a situation happening in Maine on 700-acre island, and there was a news article that I didn't find during my research that was a little bit more informative. So I want to clarify that really quickly. This is about the yellow flag law that was used to deal with the situation where a guy was spotted wearing a ballistics vest and being armed walking into the woods. They used the yellow flag law. They basically found him in a boat without those items, took him to a hospital, and they also searched the island and found, you know, a weapon and some other stuff. So the story is actually a little bit stranger than what I originally was aware of. I don't think it changes the fact that these yellow flag and red flag laws are problematic and can be easily misused on people who want to just be better prepared. But basically, he was taken in for a medical evaluation after he initially received a report that he had gotten a boat ride to the island, walked off into the woods, possibly carrying a concealed firearm, according to the sheriff's office. He also reportedly wore a bulletproof vest. Now, here's the strange thing. Things get really weird here. And this story, the way I'm looking at it, just to kind of get everyone up to date, is that now, based on this new information that I didn't previously have, I almost feel like this was some kind of, let's just say, something that might have been supposed to happen was not allowed to happen anymore, right? I don't know how else to say this because it's a very strange situation. So listen to this, basically, okay? When authorities found him, he was cooperative and he had not been criminally charged with anything, which is, first off, kind of interesting. The man was an employee of Pendleton Yacht Yard on Islesboro, and the incident came after he had a major mental break, according to owner Gabe Pendleton. So, and that's just someone's opinion, right? So who knows what mental break looks like to one person or another, but that's what was said. The man reportedly posed as a construction worker on Monday when he boarded a ferry in Lincolnville that takes contractors to 700-acre island, according to Marilyn Hanson, an employee at the island's Dark Harbor Boatyard who also operates the ferry. Hanson said the man was exhibiting strange behavior on the ride. He and other workers on the boat also noticed that the man was wearing a bulletproof vest and may have been concealing a rifle under his coat, according to Hanson. When the man got off at the island, they headed back to Lincolnville and called the police, okay? So this is a very strange situation. The guy's wearing a disguise. He's trying to get onto an island. He's got a weapon under a coat. He's wearing a bulletproof vest. There's just a lot of weird stuff going on. And then, according to Hanson, they searched the island for any weapons on Monday and Tuesday, and on Wednesday, Hanson and 5 of his co-workers took up the search and found an AK-47, some ammo, and the bulletproof vest on a property near the water. So the police didn't find any of that stuff in 2 days of searching, but on the third day, these random employees who took it upon themselves to go search the island for these things were able to produce all of this evidence. So they said we knew the gun had to be somewhere. It's just really odd. And then the agency said it actually, which is the sheriff's department, confiscated numerous firearms that belonged to the man, including a gun that civilians found on the island. So it's all very strange. I don't know what to say. I don't know if this person was stockpiling weapons on this island to use it as a staging ground for some reason or had these malicious plans. It's possible in this situation that this person was rightfully investigated, let's just say. But regardless of the reasoning behind it, the slippery slope of these types of laws is problematic no matter how you want to look at them. We already have laws on the books that allow for police to go before a judge and try to get someone declared, mentally incapable or mentally unfit, and then things happen from there with your usual checks and balances in place. And that's not exactly what is happening with these laws. So I still don't know exactly what to think about that entire thing, but it just happened here in the country. I thought it was worth talking about, and just as a reminder that things are just really getting weird these days. And this guy could have been part of some kind of organized cell or who knows what else. So there's a lot of moving parts there, but I wanted to clarify that and give everybody that additional information just so you had it in case you were still kind of curious about what was going on there, okay? Still very strange. Just going to throw that out there. Now, police state. I mean, the first story we just talked about is some of that evidence in a way, right? These yellow flag, red flag, all these laws where police can just seize weapons and then take somebody to a hospital, right? But they're not under arrest. They're just going to the hospital. That's problematic. But let's talk about what really got this conversation started and why I wanted to get going on this topic tonight, okay? New York is expanding bag checks on the subway. How is this legal? So just so everybody's aware, I think most of you probably know by now that New York has activated the National Guard to help the NYPD do bag checks in their subway stations. But there's more to the story than just what we originally were told, so I do think that that's something that we need to discuss. But I also find it interesting that when you look at these other perspectives when it comes to ideology, right? The Guardian having a lot of bias, of course. They're upset about it in the sense of legality, which is very interesting because a lot of people don't realize that there is some overlap between people with different ideologies when it comes to things like not wanting to live in a police state. Their version of a police state might be different than what yours is, but everybody can at least agree that we don't want to have our stuff randomly searched on a regular basis. The problem is that they've allowed their city to get into such a terrible situation to where crime is running so rampant where these things might be necessary, but we all know there's probably more to it than just crime causing this to happen, because crime has been a problem for a while. So why is this happening now? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but let's just talk about this really quick and give you this kind of like secondary perspective about the situation, okay? It's a common fear in New York City, the random subway attack. When a commuter gets assaulted, mugged, or pushed onto the track, the prospect is terrifying. It is also, statistically speaking, probably not going to happen to you, especially in 2024, okay? Though more transit workers are being attacked on the job nationwide, not just in New York, NYPD data shows that major felonies in the subway system were lower last year than in 2022. In January 2024, transit crime increased 46% year over year, then dipped in February. Okay, but the public's perception of danger on the subway has reached a fever pitch, perhaps unseen since the bad old days of the 1980s and early 90s, when violent crime actually peaked. Last year, the Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan described New York as a city that's lost its way, a once great metropolis ruined by bail reform and liberal leniency. This despite the fact that New York remains safer than Cleveland in Jordan's home state, according to a 2023 report. Like I said, this is a very biased news outlet, right? Kathy Hochul, the Democratic governor, who, unlike Jordan, does run the state, did little to deter the image of the city as a lawless hellscape this week when she called in the National Guard and state police to patrol subways and search commuters' bags. This came after Mayor Eric Adams added 1,000 new cops to the subway in response to January's crime spike, in which 222 transit crimes were reported, not to mention all the ones that were not reported. By evening rush hour on Wednesday, guardsmen wearing fatigues and carrying assault weapons stood by turnstiles, greeting commuters just trying to go home. Hochul framed the concerning scene as a public good, saying that deploying the 1,000 guardsmen and state police would help riders feel safer, if not actually be safer. Whether their presence will deter crime on the subway is the subject of much debate. Rattling off statistics saying things are getting better doesn't make you feel better, especially when you're just heard about someone being slashed in the throat or thrown on the subway tracks, Hochul said in a press conference. There's a psychological impact. People worry they could be next. Anxiety takes hold. Now, here's the thing. This is happening. They're telling us it's because of crime. There could be other reasons here. We know that the terror threat is highly elevated ever since everything started happening in the Middle East, right? So there's a lot of things that you could think about here. But one thing I want to bring to your attention, and something that I think is probably more likely at this point in time, just based on the information we're being given, right? If we just take all of the speculation out of the equation and we only talk about what we know for a fact based on what's being told to us, right? Look at this scene in the subway right here. You have police and guardsmen, right? They're armed, they have plate carriers on, they're well prepared to deal with a threat, okay? Now you have millions of New Yorkers on a daily basis being exposed to this type of scenery. And what this can create is a normalcy bias for the average person to expect to see members of the military in uniform, fully equipped and ready to go in public spaces, right? And this is something that is going to be a recurring theme over the next couple of articles we're going to go over, because this isn't just happening in New York. But this is what I'm talking about when I want to say the slow introduction to a post-collapse police state. This is what things are going to look like permanently as everything begins to degrade. As society begins to fall apart, you're going to see more and more of these measures, because it's not even just about the possibility of a terror threat, the possibility of crime, or anything like that. It's about getting people used to the idea that they're going to have to just do whatever these people who are armed and well-equipped tell them to do in public spaces, regardless of whether or not it's a violation of their rights, right? And of course, what's happening here, random bags searches and everything else, is not something that I consider to be friendly to my freedom. So be aware of this. Just like Governor Hochul said, there's a psychological impact. People worry they could be next. Anxiety takes hold. So what do? You get a population so desperate for safety that they're willing to give up that safety for security, right? And so now everybody's so afraid of the crime that's being committed and the possibility of terror threats and everything else that having, armed guards with select fire weapons and everything else at turnstiles in this public subway system seems reasonable. And when does that go away? Well, I mean, it has come and gone based on different events happening in the country, but this is something I just want you to consider more so than the possible threats that they're trying to combat. What's another way that this can be leveraged for those who are already in power, and how can they maintain that power by using measures like this, right? So now there's an update with that whole situation that I also find to be interesting but also concerning, and that's why I wanted to start off with that. Let's see here. Yardbird says, but some random dude on 700-acre island with a plate carrying a long gun is sus. Yeah, exactly, right? So it was good to start off with that whole thing, but not necessarily part of the conversation I wanted to have tonight, but I really felt the need to update everybody because there was more information available that I thought was relevant. But it is interesting that it still has relevance to this complete discussion. Rebecca Snavely says, ironically, Angry Prepper said these guys are located in upper class areas and not where the crime is actually happening on the subway. I 100% don't doubt that for a second. Of course, the people who want to have this level of protection are going to place it in areas where it's more beneficial to them, right? But the other thing to keep in mind with that is that you place it in these areas so that people who make the decisions and people who are, let's just say, have more financial leverage over the system when it comes to how things move and work in a metropolitan area, those people are becoming more accustomed to the idea of these armed guards. And then they might like it. They might like the comfort. They might demand it in the future. And they're also the people who have the money and the influence to make it a permanent addition, right? So keep all these things in mind, because there's a lot that can go into that equation. And you need the desperation and the crime to continually pile on. So why would you want to actually solve those crimes if there was a secondary motive for why you're actually starting some of these measures, right? Let's see here. Florida Sheepdog. They've been training students for years to being searched as normal activity in their propaganda training centers known as schools. Well, that is true. Students are frequently searched. Let's just say I saw it plenty of times myself in school. Those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety, said Ben Franklin. Florida Sheepdog, thanks so much for the super chats. I appreciate it. And you're right. That is a quote that's very powerful and very accurate. Now, let's see here. Eagle Claw 6, the beginning of martial law. So I'm not going to say this is the beginning of martial law. What I will say is that this is a way to make that whole concept much more comfortable in the eyes of the American people. So let's move forward into what just happened regarding that whole National Guard deployment in New York and talk about why it's kind of strange, and also why there's probably a reason behind it that I can figure out pretty quickly, and I'm sure you can as well. National Guard soldiers no longer carrying guns at subway bag checks. Wait a second, they're not carrying guns anymore? Or long guns, right? Why is this happening? Well, I do want to say, hey, replay crew, thank you for being here. Thanks for checking in. Make sure you comment and say what's up. I appreciate you guys always coming back on the replay and getting this information. So, what's going on here? The National Guard soldiers checking the bags of subway strap hangers are no longer carrying long guns on duty, a spokesperson for Governor Kathy Hochul has confirmed. The spokesperson told AM New York Metro that immediately following the deployment of military soldiers to the subway system last week, the governor opted to direct the New York National Guard to stop carrying assault rifles while checking bags. Now, first off, I mean, I would have thought the National Guard, would just tell her to pound sand because, like, oh, you're going to tell us to just be unarmed while we're doing this work that requires the ability to respond in case somebody has something more egregious in these bags that we're checking than just, I don't know, something left over from the night before that they shouldn't have in there. Anyway, soldiers in the subway under the long-running Joint Task Force Empire Shield are only authorized to patrol the bag check station, so no National Guard will be carrying long guns in the subway going forward, though they'll still carry them at transit hubs like Grand Central and Penn Station as they did before. The spokesperson did not immediately divulge a reason for the decision, which was the first reported by the Daily News, but widely disseminated images of soldiers carrying assault rifles in the system seem to do little to quell strap hanger safety fears within the system, eliciting a tepid reaction from riders and political blowback from both sides of the aisle and even top NYPD brass. On Wednesday, the governor ordered 750 National Guard troops and 250 members of the state police and MTA police to assist the NYPD in patrolling the subway system and to perform beefed-up bag checks at busy transit hubs. That came amid a 13% spike in major crimes in the subway system in 2024 compared to the same period in 2023, and a series of high-profile murders in the system, which also led Mayor Eric Adams to deploy an additional 1,000 cops to subway patrols. Okay. Soldiers with big guns are nothing new in New York's transit system, having long patrolled transport hubs like Grand Central Terminal, Penn Station, the Port Authority Bus Terminal, and the region's airports. Heavily armed police have also periodically patrolled the system since 9/11, and cops have been able to check bags since the deadly 2005 terrorist attack in London's transit system. But now the soldiers' presence in the subway system left many riders uneasy. So, listen, not only do we have the National Guard being activated to patrol subways and to be at turnstiles and everything else, but we also have them now being told they can't have long guns in certain aspects of it. Why is that? Well, listen to this. The governor has stated in media appearances that the National Guard is intended to have a psychological impact, both to deter would-be criminals and give riders a sense of security. She also denied that the bag checks were akin to renewed stop and frisk, as some critics have charged. Okay, so when you keep talking about psychological impacts and you keep talking about the fact that you don't want these people to have long guns in certain parts of their patrol, I, strangely enough, am coming to the conclusion that they just don't want the optics of long guns being something necessary for safety, because it sends the wrong message for a state who is highly against the idea of owning things like, AR-15s to then have to have a bunch of people with AR-15s, M4A1s, hanging out in the subway station so that these people can feel safe. All that does is kind of show how hypocritical they are when it comes to how they feel about the civilians being able to protect themselves versus the National Guard. So, this is just my opinion, but they're willing to sacrifice some of the safety and security of the National Guardsmen there solely for political purposes in order to not have to make people assume they also need to have those types of weapons in order to be safe. And if you're going to use this situation as a way to slowly build normalcy bias around the concept of armed guards within transit systems and everything else related to what a police state / martial law type scenario would look like, well, if you take away the rifles, it helps that whole experience be a little bit more palatable and kind of continues that concept of normalcy because, they're in uniform, but like they only have handguns, just like the cops, so it's not a big deal, right? So you can slowly, continually grow this concept that it's not really a big deal and that it's something that makes you safer and that you should probably like it. Oh, and by the way, look, they don't have rifles, so you don't need them either. Like, don't forget, like, even though these guys are trained professionals and they're here to protect you and hopefully themselves, they don't even need the rifles. So that should tell you as a civilian, you definitely don't either, right? It's hard for me not to feel that way based on New York's previous actions, but I assume that's exactly what's happening there. And I also think that it's part of making that normalcy bias a little bit stronger, right? Because it's easier for people to accept the idea of a police officer. Oh, a guy with a badge and a sidearm, right? Well, now if the guardsmen are mostly just badges with sidearms, it's just cops. So it's a good way to slowly and softly implement this concept into the public sphere. And at least from my knowledge, it sounds to me like police would love to just have rifles, because we all know rifles are 1,000% better than handguns when it comes to stopping a threat. But because of societal norms and the way our culture works and how we don't want to live in a police state, the police are forced to just carry handguns because it's what's acceptable, right? But once they get into a encounter with somebody who has a rifle, they're very much outmatched, even if they're 4-to-1. Because as was demonstrated here in North Dakota last summer in Fargo, one guy with an AR-15 took on 4 police officers, and it took a lot before he went down. So, and unfortunately, a lot of people got hurt. So that's just the way it looks to me, okay? Kevin Helms, it's not an AR, it's just the M4A1. Exactly, right? I wish mine was an M4A1, you know, with that extra little switch on it. Oh well, let's see. We've got Aries God says, isn't it scary how little people are willing to resist tyranny? 800,000 Ukrainian men fled conscription, yet none of them rebelled. If not, then when? Well, you know, it's just one of those things. It's a when it happens type of situation, right? And I mean, if you go back and study history with the American Revolution, there was a lot of buildup and a lot of things that maybe nowadays we would look at and say, oh, why didn't they just do something right then when it happened, right? But they didn't. But there was that defining moment, you know, that whole shot heard around the world situation where the revolution finally began. And even in that time, I mean, there were still collaborators, there were still sympathizers, there were still people who weren't wanting to get involved or anything else. And that's just the way that these things always go, right? Let's see here. Florida Sheepdog, it's not about safety, it's about optics. Right, well, and that's the concern about the rifles to me. The optics of having the need for a rifle to defend yourself is not acceptable in New York, right? So they had to make sure to fix that so that way it wasn't going to be such a big deal for the average person to say, you know, why are these guys just carrying rifles, like, why, and we're not even allowed to own them, you know? Let's see here. Round 1 says, I grew up in Los Angeles and stop and frisk is ridiculous. No joke, there was guys where I was stopped like 6 or 7 times. Once at gunpoint, they made me put my baby on the ground. That's not cool. I'm not into that. And here's the thing, like I personally want our cities and our country as a whole to be safer. I do. And I think that we've built up a lot of bad policy to the point where some of our cities are now dangerous quagmires, basically third world countries in some places, right? And we've done that to ourselves. And the only way to correct that is going to be through aggressive policy, which is not something acceptable in many ways in a free country. But in those areas, is that even a free country anymore, or is it anarchy, right? So there's some different ways to look at it. So I want everyone to be safer, but I don't want to live in a police state. You know, that's also something I think most people in the preparedness community can agree upon. We don't want the government all over us all the time. I don't want to get stopped and searched. I don't, because I'm not doing anything wrong, right? So like there still should be that level of being safe without having to be criminalized in the process, right? And it's a hard balance. And once there's a line that once society goes below that certain line, you can no longer meet that balance. You either keep going down or you have to correct course with aggressiveness that wouldn't be acceptable in a free society but might be necessary, right? So it's a really difficult situation, which is one of the reasons why I don't live in a metropolitan environment. Let's see, I came, oh, I missed that super chat. Oh, there we go. I came for a minute to donate to Prepperlay Pew Pew. I will listen to you the whole thing tomorrow. Dude, your intel is great. As always, well thought. Thanks. Well, you're welcome, and thank you very much. And I appreciate that you come back to listen afterward. I really do. So, now, just as a secondary example of a similar situation, right? I am not opposed to what's happening in Texas when it comes to wanting to secure the southern border. I'm not a big fan of doing a lot of this stuff for the purpose of political posturing and optics, which some of it seems to be, right? I mean, that's just based on eyewitness testimony of people who have gone down there to check it out for themselves. I mean, I don't know what to say. But at the same time, I do support the concept of doing whatever we got to do to secure that border because I'm at least aware of some of those threats that are coming through. And I think many of you are as well. But now we're talking about, you know, another area of the country where we have armed, uniformed members of the National Guard in the country that are operating as a military force in many ways, and they're now getting funds for a base camp, right? So this might be necessary. I'm not trying to argue that point. Not at all. I understand that we got to secure that border. I really do. I believe that. I think most people can agree on that, most reasonable people. I don't know what else to say if you don't think that we need to. I don't get that either. But this is still just more of this in the public eye and more normalization of having armed troops in everyday American life. And that's it should still raise some questions, right, for you, regardless of whether or not you support it. Like I said, I support doing what needs to be done to get that thing secured. That's just my personal feeling because I want our country to be safe. I don't know what else to tell you. But here we are. So the Texas Department acquired 80 acres of land in Eagle Pass to construct a forward operating base that will house up to 1,800 Texas National Guard soldiers, with the ability to accommodate an additional 500. The base camp also will feature a 700-seat dining facility, a recreation center, laundry facilities, Wi-Fi access, individual rooms for soldiers starting at 118 square feet, chaplaincy programs, and medical and psychological health facilities. Texas is expanding our border security capabilities by building a new Texas Military Department base camp to increase and improve border security operations in this area, said Abbott. This will increase the ability for a larger number of Texas Military Department soldiers in Eagle Pass to operate more effectively and efficiently. Before now, the Texas National Guard has been scattered across this entire region in cramped quarters away from fellow soldiers, and sometimes traveling long distances to do their job. This base camp is going to dramatically improve conditions for our soldiers. Texas would not be able to respond to President Biden's border crisis without the brave men and women of the Texas National Guard, and it is essential to build this base camp for them. Okay, so like I said, I'm not opposed to this situation. I am just concerned about the fact we are, in other parts of the country, normalizing the concept of needing soldiers on the ground in order to maintain what should just be consistent and regular stability, right? And so I guess part of the problem that, I guess I'm just kind of spitballing at this point, but part of the problem is that we've allowed things to get to the point where the deployment of National Guardsmen here in the country is required, right? That's problematic. And it kind of gives you something to go off of when it comes to concerns in the future, whether or not it's about a post-collapse police state, whether or not it's about the idea of just a militarized version of the country, right? Whatever you want to say or however you want to call it, if you allow places to get bad enough, the only solution is to deploy troops, right? And how long does that last? What does that look like? And what kind of quality of life / level of legality are you living under at that point in time? Some could call it de facto martial law. Some could call it soft martial law, whatever you want to call it. But we're watching the deployment of troops on American soil pretty regularly at this point. And of course, other states are joining in. We have Tennessee sending troops. We have Missouri sending troops. We have everybody sending troops. And like I said, I agree that the southern border needs to be secure. I just do. I don't know how to fix it otherwise, but it should just remind you that that's the state we're currently in, where we're allowing things to get to that point to where the only answer is military. And knowing that, how easily could other parts of the country or other problems be resolved in the same manner, especially when the people who they're most concerned about are like homesteaders who own a rifle and want to be left alone, right? So, let's see here. Oki Khan, hello, good to see you. Michelle the Great, so does the North. I am not sure what you're referring to, but the North has some big issues when it comes to border crossings, 100%. There's illegal border crossings on the northern border all the time. And it's much less safe. And in fact, they're finding more terrorists trying to cross the border there than at the southern border. And it's because they know it's not secure at all and that nobody even thinks about it. It's not getting media attention. So keep that in mind too. Not sure if you guys are talking about that or not, but that is something to be aware of, okay? Now, Let's see. Water the Tree 76 says it will be worse than Haiti here. We'll talk about Haiti here in a minute, don't worry. But first, we're going to keep talking about domestic issues. Now, this was a tragedy that happened. It was unfortunate. Helicopter carrying National Guardsman and Border Patrol agent crashes in Texas, killing 3. Now, here's the thing. This is obviously a tragedy. We don't want to see, you know, guardsmen or police lose their life in this manner, especially when they're trying to just secure our country. But the other problem here is that this is what happens when you have like military deployment within the country. We have a forward operating base being set up. We have helicopters flying around. We have armored vehicles. We have all kinds of stuff going on. Much like a war zone, right? So this is still part of the equation when it comes to some of that normalcy bias. People are getting used to the concept of military helicopters flying around and crashing and stuff here, which is, like I said, a tragedy. A helicopter flying over the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas crashed Friday, killing 2 National Guard soldiers and a Border Patrol agent, the military said. Another soldier on board was injured. The UH-72 Lakota helicopter was assigned to the federal government's border security mission when it went down near Rio Grande City, according to a statement released by Joint Task Force North. The cause was under investigation. The crash happened mid-afternoon Friday while the helicopter was conducting aviation operations, according to the statement. No other details were provided. Okay, now, obviously a tragedy, but just a reminder that, like, it's not just guys on the ground with rifles there. There's people in helicopters. Like, it's a military operation on American soil. So is what's happening in the New York City subways. Like, this is what it will look like everywhere if that time comes, right? And as long as these things keep happening and as long as they last, more and more Americans are going to get used to the idea of it. And so when they start seeing MRAPs driving down the street full of guardsmen, they're going to just go back to business as usual rather than being concerned about what might be happening, right? And then that level of complacency will be much easier to deal with in the sense of trying to corral the masses when curfews are put into place, roadblocks are set up, you know, congregations aren't allowed, all kinds of stuff, right? Okay, Miles Manga says Haiti is beautiful. Oh, man. Oh, man. Round 1 says the cartels have taken out Black Hawk helicopters in the past with RPGs. Yes, they have. And like I said, they said the crash is under investigation. We don't know, or at least so far, I don't personally know who was responsible or if it was an equipment failure or whatnot. But I will say, and this is just from my personal opinion, I'm just throwing this out there for everybody, but I don't know about flying these days as much anymore. Like, I used to not even care about jumping on an airplane. Seemed like normal business to me, right? I don't know how I feel much about the level of maintenance and the age of a lot of our equipment when it comes to things that are flying around in the air these days. It seems like a lot of stuff keeps happening almost on a daily basis, but just throwing that out there. Now, talking about a post-collapse police state, things are being put into place right now in order to, let's just say, figure out who the real problem is. And in fact, I'm going to pop something up here real quick. That way we can be prepared for a beautiful segue. Okay. All right. Oh my goodness, get out of here. You know when computers try to fight you? That's what just happened to me. All right, so let's go. This is all about the feds, which, by the way, I am one, apparently, according to the internet. So I'll let you know how that pension looks. I'm looking forward to it very much so. And all that other stuff you get for being a Fed that I guess I'm not aware of. But yeah, that's me. You know, don't let anyone fool you because I'm out here trying to mislead you guys to, I don't know, grow potatoes and have some ammo stashed away. But anyway, I know, terrible advice. That's how those feds get you. The feds are coming for extremist gamers. This is an article from March 9th. The Department of Homeland Security and FBI are in dialogue with Roblox, Discord, Reddit, and others. So before we get too far into this part of the conversation, I'm going to go ahead and drop my Discord link here in the chat in case anybody's interested. You can join up. It's free. It's a public server. But I will warn you, there's a lot of interesting characters there, and sometimes they say things that I don't agree with. So be aware of that. Discord is not a place for anyone who's sensitive. Just going to throw that out there right now. We have pretty strict rules in place for what keeps a place alive, let's just say, because they will shut you down really quickly based on some certain activity. But at the same time, you know, I also appreciate free speech and whatnot, but there's some things we're just not going to be talking about in that server. So, but it does get spicy, and those reminders have to be made sometimes, and that's just how it works when you let a lot of people join into a public forum, right? But it is there, and there are channels for different states and countries if you're trying to network with other prepared people. So I just put the Discord in the chat. Why? Because the feds are coming for extremist gamers, and Discord's working with them. So, oh wait, did I just make a trap? I don't know, but here we go. If you don't think these things are unsecure or being watched already, then you're not with it, right? Like, the feds are in my chat for sure. They're hanging out. I've got one who's probably assigned to me. I like to think of his name as being Jerry. And yeah, he just kind of hangs out and scoffs at a few things I say, I'm sure. Coordinate with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security to root out so-called domestic violent extremist content, according to a new government report, noting that mechanisms have been established with social media companies to police extremism. The report recommends that the national security agencies establish new and similar processes with the vast gaming industry. The exact nature of the cooperation between federal agencies and video game companies, which has not been previously reported, is detailed in a new Government Accountability Office report. The report draws on interviews conducted with 5 gaming and social media companies, including Roblox, an online gaming platform, which, by the way, has a horrible track record with protecting children. Discord, a social media app commonly used by gamers. Yep, and preppers, apparently. Reddit, as well as a game publisher and social media company that asked GAO to remain anonymous. The Intercept reached out to the companies identified in the GAO report for comment, but none responded on the record at time of publication. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have mechanisms to share and receive domestic violent extremism threat-related information with social media and gaming companies, the GAO says. By the way, if you're in the Discord, if you're on Reddit, if you're gaming, or you're playing Roblox for some odd reason, you might want to be careful about just saying whatever you think in the moment, because you might get a knock on the door. I'm just throwing that out there. The report reveals that the DHS Intelligence Office meets with gaming companies and that the companies can use these meetings to share information with INA about online activities promoting domestic violent extremism, or even simply activities that violate the hundreds of resident agencies' subordinate field offices. The FBI receives tips from gaming companies of potential law-breaking and extremist views for further investigation. The FBI also conducts briefings to gaming companies on purported threats, okay? So, they're getting it put together. They're everywhere. They're getting the coordination, the cooperation. This is also part of the modern age police state, is being in everybody's entertainment or communication or whatever it may be, and then using it against you when the time comes if there's anything that they're upset about. Regardless of whether or not it actually reaches to the level of a real threat, doesn't matter. They can just decide that they need to at least investigate, right? So just be aware of that, because people say a lot of crazy stuff on Reddit, in Discord, in gaming chats, all kinds of things. And that hammer's coming down. So, let's see. If you are not on a list or two, you are not doing it right, says Mr. Landfill. Well, you know what? Not going to lie, that's definitely true, okay? Let's see here. Gee, I wonder why they're doing this. It must be because they're interested in increasing public safety. Nothing to do with power or control. Exactly, John Doe. 1776. Why would they be worried about any of those things other than safety and security? Listen, they're putting a lot of resources into this, and not into the things that are actually problematic right now in the world, and especially here in our country. But that's what's going on. Now, here's some other things to consider moving forward, especially in this election cycle, when it comes to like the possibility of like a police state, because there is the heightened risk of political, we'll call it activism at this point in time, and the media is definitely complicit in it. But we also have a lot of anger going around, and then Congress making some interesting moves. So first, let's talk about some of the anger, okay? We recently had that Supreme Court decision about Trump being able to be allowed on the ballot in Colorado, right? Regardless of how you feel about Trump or anybody else, I would agree that I think we should just vote for people we want or don't want, right? So if you don't like it, just don't vote for it, right? But they were trying to remove him from the ballot based on being an insurrectionist, in their opinion. And now everybody's mad at the Supreme Court, okay? So real quick, I just want to, anyway, talk about this thought process here. And this is how people are viewing this from the perspective I don't necessarily share, but it is important to kind of see how people are looking at these types of things, okay? The Supreme Court's ruling in Trump v. Anderson is a disaster for the American constitutional order. It paves the way for insurrectionists to run for and hold federal office despite the Constitution's categorical language that disqualifies them. It decides questions that weren't before the justices in this case in the first place, and the answers they gave will only immunize these and future insurrectionists from potential consequences. It blatantly twists text and history to reach a preferred outcome. In a case about the importance of oaths of office, the justices seem to have forgotten theirs. Okay, and this is an article from TNR, the New Republic, and this is from March 4th, okay? And clearly they're very biased, but also very upset about what's going on there, okay? And let's see here. I'm going to go down here for a second. There was a part about the Civil War I wanted to jump on here. Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. So the 5-justice majority, which I'm pretty sure they're saying it's 5 because it's 5 men and then there's 4 women. The 5-justice majority said, but we have an answer to that. They argued that the 14th Amendment's drafters did just that by including an enforcement clause at the end of the amendment. The Supreme Court rested its argument on Section 5, which contains the usual final clause in many of the post-Civil War constitutional amendments. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So basically they're saying that they decided it should be up to Congress, not states individually, to remove somebody from a ballot. Here's the thing. People are really upset about this on one side of the argument, and it opens the door to, well, the same thought process that people have on the other side when it comes to the legitimacy of everything, right? So now they've already decided that based on this Supreme Court ruling that Trump should have been allowed to be on the ballot in Colorado, and now is allowed to be on the ballot in every state thereafter. Now they're going to look at this upcoming election as not being legitimate based on the fact that they think the Supreme Court was wrong. Okay? How do you think that's going to go? Now, I have a feeling that there's a reason why these congressmen are putting together a new amendment. Let's talk about it. Okay. Derek Kilmer introduces constitutional amendment to ensure congressional continuity, reduce incentive for political violence. Now, like I said, this police state situation, soft rollout, right? You have to put all the pieces into place first. You have to make sure everybody has where they need to be figured out before you roll out the big one, right? So you got to have all these little things ready to go and ready to be activated when the time comes. And this is, why is this happening now? I think it's a good question to ask yourself. Why? Well, let me read to you. Okay. U.S. Representatives Derek Kilmer, Brad Wenstrup, William Timmons, and Emmanuel Cleaver proposed a constitutional amendment, continuity amendment, to temporarily fill House vacancies, ensuring congressional continuity and reducing the incentive for political violence. In recent years, experts from across the political spectrum, including a nonpartisan commission on the continuity of Congress, have raised concerns regarding the current process for addressing a vacancy in the U.S. House following the death of a member of Congress. Currently, the Constitution mandates that the House vacancies be filled by special elections. These special elections can generally take 3 to 4 months. Experts have warned that this delay would leave the House unable to function following a mass casualty event and could perhaps create an incentive for political violence if someone wanted to flip a majority. Why are they so worried about this right now? Our proposal solves 2 concerns. By the way, they're worried about this like in 2024 rather than any other time in history. Just throwing that out there. Our proposal solves 2 concerns. For one, it would ensure the continuity of the legislative branch during times of crisis. And second, because our proposal requires representatives to provide a list of designees who are qualified to serve in their place, almost assuredly from their own party, it would reduce the incentive for political violence, said Rep. Kilmer. The risks may be low, but if something catastrophic were to happen, the impacts would be immense. If Congress fails to enact a legitimate continuity plan, the American people will be left wondering why. In the world's leading democracy, there was no plan to protect our most sacred democratic institutions. In 2017, I was on a baseball field when a violent, gun-wielding extremist attempted to alter the balance of power in the House of Representatives by assassinating Republican members of Congress, said Representative Wenstrup. With what I witnessed that day, I believe it's necessary that we as a body act now to ensure that should tragedy strike, God forbid, the House is able to continue the people's work and preserve the continuity of government. That is why I'm proud to join Rep. Kilmer in supporting this effort and drive the conversation. On a day like the State of the Union address, I am reminded of how important it is that the American people have continued representation in the people's house, even during times of crisis, said Representative Timmons. Although it's an uncomfortable issue to consider, we would be derelict in our duty if we did not ensure that the proper tools are in place so Congress can continue to do its job on behalf of the American people. Our amendment proposal addresses this issue to ensure the House remains strong and ready to serve in times of crisis. Okay? Congress must have the capacity to immediately respond to the needs of the American people no matter the situation. And just because the United States has been fortunate enough to avoid falling headfirst into this potentially disastrous hole in the Constitution does not mean that we should assume it is impossible, said Representative Cleaver. In fact, after all that the world has witnessed in the past few years, from international conflict to COVID, I think it's critical that we have a plan in place. The Continuity Amendment is a common sense, bipartisan proposal that disincentivizes political violence and provides a reasonable, rational way forward should a mass casualty event occur in Congress. And I'm proud to join forces with Representatives Kilmer, Timmons, and Wenstrup to begin the process of adding it to the Constitution. The Continuity Amendment aims to improve the continuity plan for the House, especially in the case of unexpected vacancies. Okay? I just find the timing interesting. This is a self-preservation move in many ways. I understand the importance of continuity of government, especially in a situation like a war, right? If we were to find ourselves in open conflict with a major superpower like Russia or China, and let's say they decided to attack Washington, D.C., continuity of government is an important function of maintaining some level of governance, right? That's why we have the chain of succession. Right? But this is very much a self-preservation amendment, right? To make sure that no matter what happens, there will be something. So the timing makes it seem interesting to me. And the fact that they're very concerned about a mass casualty event, I don't know. Maybe it just reflects the way people feel as a whole in the country at this point in time, based on people acting up. Or maybe it's because there's a legitimate concern that we're just not being told about. I don't know. And when it comes to enabling a police state or a de facto martial law type scenario, you would think it'd probably be important to make sure that you can maintain power regardless of what happens. Don't worry, we have Jack Bauer, says Rip Curl Readiness. Thanks, Rip Curl, for being here. You too, Northern Girl Hobbies. I appreciate you all modding and always helping me out. I really do. Let's see here. We've got Yardbirds, solutions to problems that don't exist. Typical. Yeah, well. Patriot Zero. The average normie doesn't even know what an amendment is, let alone how many we have. Well, that's the thing. It's easy to get these things through because most people are going to look at that and think it's very reasonable. But, like I said, the timing and the language there within does give me some reasons to have some concern. Not necessarily about anything in particular, but I just found it odd. And I thought it went hand in hand with the concept of maintaining, continuity, but you could look at continuity as being power in some ways, regardless of how you feel about it. I mean, that's just the truth, right? That's why people are so worried about, Speaker of the House, because they're third in line, right? So just keep that in mind. All right. Now, Potato Head, hello to you as well. Thank you for being here. And I always appreciate all of you saying hi in the chat. I do my best to say hello, but here we are. Lee says there's already a continuity of government. Something stinks. Well, to me, I'm just saying, they don't have the same processes in place for individual representatives, but I don't know. It just kind of caught me off guard. I don't know what else to say, especially the language involved. a lot of talk about mass casualty events, and I mean, maybe they know about a certain war that we're likely to be in here very soon. I'm not sure. Like, as if maybe they even could be part of it. Hugo, what's up to you too? Appreciate you. Okay, now let's talk about some of this other stuff going on in other parts of the world. Okay, just to kind of brush up, because there's been a lot happening, and we want to just be aware of it in order to maintain some, I don't know, concept as to where things are. The U.S. Embassy warns of imminent attack in Moscow by extremists. Now, apparently, we warned about this attack, giving a 48-hour notice to Americans within Moscow, saying that something is likely to happen, avoid large gatherings, all that kind of stuff. Well, Russia's FSB is saying it foiled an attack on a synagogue in Moscow that was being planned by an arm of ISIS, okay? Now, obviously, we know if that's true or not. We can't verify it. It's from the Russian FSB. But what I can say is that we told them there could be a thing, and then they're saying they stopped the thing from happening. So this stuff could be real, especially when it comes to intelligence communities coming together and saying, there's a real threat, be careful. And so if you're getting a warning from the U.S. Embassy, wherever you are, or if you're getting a warning in general as just like a civilian, I would at least consider it to be real, even if it's not, because better safe than sorry sometimes, right? So the U.S. Embassy in Russia warned that extremists had an imminent plan for an attack in Moscow hours after Russian security services said they had foiled a planned shooting at a synagogue by a cell from the Afghan arm of Islamic State. The embassy, which has repeatedly urged all U.S. citizens to leave Russia immediately, gave no further details about the nature of the threat, but said people should avoid concerts and crowds and be aware of their surroundings. Now, here's the thing. The FSB and Russia in general was upset, saying like, okay, if you guys know something like that, you need to tell us, right? Because if you're not going to tell us what's going to happen and people die, we're going to say it's your fault because you were aware of something you decided not to let us know about. I understand that relationship's a little rocky right now, so whatever. But apparently they're saying that they figured it out and they took care of it, okay? This is just something that happened, okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about this little nugget that was dropped on us this past week. Okay? March 10th, this article came out. CIA estimated 50% chance that Russia would nuke Ukraine if it risked losing the war. So, I just want you guys to think about this real quick. The CIA said in 2022 that there was a 50% chance or higher. Okay, I'll just, right here. In 2022, the CIA warned President Biden of a 50% chance or higher that Russia would reach for its nuclear arsenal if it found its forces were decimated and the illegally annexed territory of Crimea was at risk, according to the New York Times. Okay? I just want you guys to be aware that even with that information, we continue to see what would happen, right? So this is still on the table. Nuclear war is still on the table. Just because it hasn't happened over the last 2 years doesn't mean it can't happen or that it won't happen. And this is even saying especially if the territory of Crimea was at risk. And we have recordings from the Germans talking about how they could strike the Crimean Bridge, right? So regardless of this information, everything's going full speed ahead. So nuclear war is still a possibility. No one should discount that at this point. A lot of people have because it hasn't happened yet, so they assume it's just not going to happen. I'm not seeing that being the case. I think that we're lucky it hasn't happened yet, okay? But this is just about what the CIA said the chance of it was back in October of 2022. I'm concerned just because if it was 50% then, what is it now, right? Okay, and hold on one second. Oki Khan says more propaganda. And you know what? Sure. Army sappers or CIA throwing out 50-50 is like the weatherman in my state. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. 50-50 is like, if you're right or wrong, it doesn't matter either way, right? But the issue is that 50% is really high when it comes to that type of a topic, right? No one wants to flip a coin on whether or not to nuke somebody. But that's basically what they were saying. So, let's go ahead and jump over to this little ditty. Like I said, we're just touching base on these things, so it's important to be aware of what's happening. Russia producing 3 times, or is it 3 over there? I don't know anymore. 3 times more artillery shells than US and Europe for Ukraine. Okay? That's a lot. They have hugely ramped up their production capacity. in their wartime economy. And the U.S. and Europe can't catch up quite yet. And it's kind of wild because Russia just said, fine, this is going to be a war of attrition. We'll give you a war of attrition. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Russia appears on track to produce nearly 3 times more artillery munitions than the U.S. and Europe, a key advantage ahead of what is expected to be another Russian offensive in Ukraine later this year. Russia is producing about 250,000 artillery munitions per month, or about 3 million a year, according to NATO intelligence estimates of Russian defense production shared with CNN, as well as sources familiar with Western efforts to arm Ukraine. Collectively, the US and Europe have the capacity to generate only about 1.2 million munitions annually to send to Kiev, a senior European intelligence official told CNN. Now, is this just BS as a way to say, see, they're outpacing us by 3 times. We have to do more, possibly, right? Well, it could be true. The U.S. military set a goal to produce 100,000 rounds of artillery a month by the end of 2025, less than half of the Russian monthly output. And even that number is now out of reach, with $60 billion in Ukraine funding stalled in Congress, a senior Army official told reporters last week. Like I said, could this just be a way for them to try to push more funding? Possibly. But the other thing to consider is that it's just true. And they're outpacing us, and even our goal of what we should be able to produce by 2025 is half of what they're producing right now, which means we'll never build up to the same amount of munitions. So, unless something miraculous happens and we have like a World War II moment where everybody starts turning in their aluminum. But that's what they're capable of right now. Now, I've heard lots of people say that the Russian artillery is nowhere near as effective as American and European artillery, but 3 times as much of it probably has a decent effect. So just be aware that that's what's happening in the sense of them pushing things forward. Now, we also had this situation where one of Putin's allies made an ominous prediction of an unprecedented escalation with NATO. This was yesterday. Excuse me. Olga Scaba, a host on Russian state-run television allied with Russian President Vladimir Putin, made an ominous prediction during a recent broadcast about an escalating conflict with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Spurred on by Russia's continued aggression against Ukraine, Sweden on Thursday became the latest nation to officially join the NATO military alliance, roughly 2 years since Russia's invasion first began. Last April, Finland was also admitted as a member, growing the ranks of the alliance that Putin has long viewed as a threat. Given the pact between NATO members to provide military assistance to other members that are attacked, the alliance is seen by many as a key deterrent against Russian aggression against European nations, as one conflict would escalate into a fight against the entire alliance, including the likes of the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. During a recent broadcast on one of Russia's state-run TV programs, Scaba expressed grave concern about the possibility of an imminent attack against Russia from NATO forces. The clip of her comments was shared to X, formerly Twitter, on Saturday by Julia Davis, the founder of the Russian Media Monitor watchdog group, who surmised that Scaba's rhetoric was a propaganda poly to prime Russian citizens to support the idea of a preemptive strike. Okay? Look, if that's what happens, that's going to be a big problem. Call things by their names, Scaba said, as translated by Russian Media Monitor. It made everyone sick today how NATO may attack us and possibly destroy us. Just try to wrap your mind around it. Okay? This came after Scaba touched on the recent claim from Singapore's Minister of Defense, Ng Hen, that new American F-35 fighter jets had been deployed for certain operations in Ukraine, which she described as being a potential hint of an unprecedented escalation that could take place between Russia and NATO. Despite her concerns, as Davis noted in her post, the other panelists on the show attempted to explain why such things were less likely than she made them out to be. Okay. Well, do they have any real concern for that? I would assume probably, yeah. Okay. British soldiers on the ground in Ukraine, says German military leak. By the way, the Germans really screwed up on this one. Kremlin claims audio of officers discussing UK help with missiles shows involvement of Collective West. British soldiers are on the ground in Ukraine helping Kiev's forces fire long-range Storm Shadow missiles, according to a leak in the Russian media of a top-secret call involving German Air Force officers. The Kremlin said the leak demonstrated the direct involvement of the Collective West in the war in Ukraine, while former British defense ministers expressed frustration with the German military in response to the revelations. Okay? Now, just keep this in mind. British soldiers are on the ground. They're helping with missile systems. That's what was in that German leaked audio. Okay? Well, this news just came out, and maybe there's some validity to it. Russia, U.S. troops may have died in Ukraine strike. Okay? This just came out today. A Russian-aligned lawmaker said U.S. military personnel may have been killed in a missile strike in Ukraine. Mikhail Sheremet, a state Duma deputy from the occupied Crimean region, told RIA Novosti that 2 Patriot air defense systems had been targeted by the Russian army in the Donetsk region. Forbes reported Saturday that a Russian surface-to-surface missile crew scored a direct hit on a Ukrainian convoy that included at least 2 truck-mounted quad launchers for a Patriot surface-to-air missile battery. 2 of the apparent Patriot launchers exploded, almost certainly killing their crews, Forbes reported. During the destruction of the Patriot air defense system, U.S. military members also may have been killed, Sheremet told RIA Novosti, Pravda reported. Sheremet reportedly added that the Patriot air defense system is difficult to use, and therefore U.S. military specialists may have been supplied to help Ukraine. A Pentagon spokesperson, though, told Newsweek, "I can confirm no U.S. injuries because we have no U.S. service members in the fight." Okay? Social media users emphasize that 2 Patriot launchers, which cost $10 million each, and not an entire Patriot system, worth around $400 million, was destroyed. The report concerning the launchers marked the first time in the war that Russia had been able to hit components of the U.S.-supplied air defense systems, Forbes reported. Okay, so I don't know the validity of that situation, but it sounds possible, especially based on the fact that Germany was saying that there's British troops on the ground in Ukraine helping the missile systems. So is it that far-fetched to assume there could be American troops helping set up Patriot missile systems that would otherwise be complicated? Not sure, but I'm just telling you. So let's see here. Now, we have Haiti. That's a thing, okay? Nick, why didn't all that happen by Hamas get as much coverage as everything else? I hope you understand. I can't say everything that you wrote just because of weird things that happen on this platform. They were wearing GoPros, dude. The reason, well, it did. I don't, Nick, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it got a lot of coverage, to be honest with you. But I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve to be remembered. And honestly, regardless of how anyone felt about the politics of that region, what happened on that day was egregious and terrible. And the people who committed those acts were barbarians and didn't deserve to live anymore. And that's just my opinion. So, yeah, I think that is something that everyone should be aware of and be considering whenever they're worried about their own preparedness, because you're not safe from that just because you live somewhere else. Because barbarians like that live all over the world. And we're literally going to talk about some right this second. So, U.S. military airlifts non-essential staff from embassy in Haiti bolsters security amid ongoing gang violence. Unrelenting gang attacks have paralyzed Haiti for more than a week and left it with dwindling supplies of basic goods. The U.S. military sent forces to Haiti to airlift non-essential staff from the U.S. Embassy and help bolster security amid gang violence plaguing the Caribbean nation. Okay? If you guys don't know this, Haiti has devolved into complete societal collapse. And right now, the entire country is being ran by a vicious cannibalistic gang whose leader's name is Barbecue because he likes to light people on fire and then eat them. That's what's happening in Haiti right now. I don't want to go through this whole article because I just told you everything you really need to know. It's a failed state. It's a collapsed nation. And the people who are in charge of things right this second at least, or at least so it appears to be, are gangs who are willing to eat people. So my thought on this whole thing is I don't negotiate with cannibals. That's what I got for you there, okay? I hope that sends a clear message for how I feel about it. NGOs to send pallets of barbecue sauce to Haiti as humanitarian aid. Yeah, no joke. Yeah, and Haiti has received quite a bit of aid over the years that seems to just always get misplaced. And it has people involved with it who also misplace other people sometimes. All right, Roaming Prepper, good to see you. Glad you're here, okay? Let's see here. Ready for the toilet paper rapture of 2024, says Lightning 77 ATH or AT Hiker. You know what? I hope that never happens again, but here we are. Savagely, meat's back on the menu. All right, so One more SHTF example, which is what we're talking about right now. Okay, these real SHTF examples. This Haiti thing is a real thing. It's messed up. This is a failed state. People there are getting eaten. Like I said, I don't negotiate with cannibals. No one else should either, which means I think you can go in there and do whatever you got to do to get some stability back. That's just my thought process, okay? If I lived there, that's what I would hope someone else would do. If my country got taken over by a gang of cannibalistic freaks, I would hope that, like, any other country would come in with A-10s and just mow the place. Because I don't know what else to say. I don't want to have to live like that. So please, someone come in and do the thing. That's what I would be asking for. This is me. All right. Anyway, a quick note on current SHTF happening and how it can be solved. IMF says Ecuador asked to begin discussing a new program. Bonds rise. Ecuador has been taken over by cartel violence and gang violence in recent months, and they're experiencing similar to what's happening in Haiti, but just not as, let's just call it, not as spicy, right? And that's not a barbecue reference, I promise. The International Monetary Fund said on Thursday that Ecuadorian authorities officially requested a few weeks ago to begin discussions on a potential new program with the IMF, but gave no details. Staff are actively engaging with the authorities to assess the economic situation and support the reforms to address the challenges facing the country, Fund spokesperson Julie Kozak said in a scheduled press briefing. Okay? The recent wave of violence has come at a time of a challenging macroeconomic and fiscal outlook for Ecuador. You mean Ecuador is literally in the midst of societal breakdown, where cartels and gang members are running around doing whatever they want, let's just say. Okay? All right? Ecuador has been fighting violence blamed on drug trafficking, with the government last month proposing to raise security spending by $214 million this year as it deploys the military to help fight the violence, right? Hey, look at that. Violent crime is on the rise, and the military is being deployed to help tamp it down. Interesting. Okay. I wonder if that's like anything else happening in America right now. Well, if Ecuador has the solution, maybe we should look into that. What is the solution, Ecuador? Let's take a look here. And Nick, no worries. I appreciate the support and the kind words. I really do. I just... I have my thoughts, you know what I mean? And we're all people. We're allowed to have our own opinions. We don't have to agree with each other, but we can always, learn from one another. So here's how the IMF works when you start negotiating new programs. And I thought I'd share this because if you wanted to seize control of a nation based on economic possibility and leverage, then let them fall into complete chaos, and then have them ask the IMF for help with a new program in order to get the funding they need to get back on their feet, right? It's a pretty common strategy used throughout human history. Here's how it works. IMF lending in action. First, a member country in need of financial support makes a request to the IMF. Are you in need of financial support? Yeah, we have criminal gangs ruining the country. We can't produce anything economically anymore. Okay, give us a call. Then the country's government and the IMF staff discuss the economic and financial situation and financing needs. Oh, what's your situation? Oh, criminal gangs are overrunning our military and police, and we're not sure what we're going to do about it? Okay, got it. You need more money so you can get more militarized in order to fight that. No problem. Typically, a country's government and the IMF agree on a program of economic policies before the IMF lends to the country. In most cases, a country's commitments to undertake certain policy actions, known as policy conditionality, are an integral part of IMF lending. What are you going to do that's going to make us happy with you taking our money? Oh, well, we'll implement the military stuff you want us to do, the police stuff you want us to do, the DEI stuff you want us to do, the ESG stuff you want us to do, all the stuff you want us to do. We can do all of it. We just need you to help us because right now our country is literally falling apart and we're afraid. Okay, once the terms are agreed upon, the policy program underlying an arrangement is presented to the IMF's executive board in a letter of intent and detailed in a memorandum of understanding. The IMF staff makes a recommendation to the executive board to endorse the country's policy intentions and offer financing. This process can be expedited under the IMF's emergency financing mechanism. Oh, well, if you're in really dire need and you're willing to do all the things we just told you have to do, all those things, then we can do like an emergency. We can do it like right now. We'll save you. You need saving? We'll save you. No problem. Just remember those things you agreed to. After its executive board approves a loan, the IMF monitors how members implement the policy actions underpinning it. A country's return to economic and financial health ensures that IMF funds are repaid so that they can be made available to other member countries. So they monitor you after you take their money to make sure you're doing all those things you agreed to, because you have to, because it's the IMF, right? So strangely enough, it looks to me like if your country is spiraling out of control and you have, I don't know, a rise in criminal violence that then requires you to, I don't know, deploy the military and the public space in order to secure your ability to maintain control and then possibly keep the civilian population safe, that you always have someone to turn to, the old IMF. And once you turn to them, all you have to do is agree to some of their policies, and they'll give you the money you need to get more militarized so you can deal with all that stuff that caused you to be where you are now, right? So, seems pretty straightforward to me. That's what you should expect. Things get worse here or anywhere else, okay? All right. Dapper Dingo. Jeff Dahmer's mom said one night while eating dinner, Jeffrey, I don't like your friends. All right. I can get that one. And I wasn't aware that he had so much in common with what's happening in Haiti right now, but here we are. Let's see here. A gate Beowulf. I don't know, man. I'm a Filipino myself, and only people with a screw loose do that. Pets in my neighborhood are at least treated like family. Okay. I'm not sure where that came from or what that was applied to, but I appreciate that about you. All right. Oki Khan says martial law incoming. You know what? I'm just saying, if you can get the people used to the concept of it, then one day when it's actually here, we might not even realize it, right? Oh, check my bags. Oh, gotta go through a checkpoint. Oh, it's 11 p.m. Better be inside. Oh, internet got shut off because it's past 2 a.m. Good night, right? Like, how fast do you think the average person would acclimate to that? My guess, like, immediately. So, especially if you can actually have the internet after 2 a.m. as long as you don't have any infractions. Well, we all know I need my internet after 2 a.m., so whatever you say, boss. All right. In the Texas primary, some proposed constitutional amendments. Yeah, well, there's... I mean, you can always amend the Constitution. I just hope it's amended for good reasons, right? And for things that we need, and not things that we don't. And that's always a slippery slope. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, they say. And sometimes. All right, well, listen. I appreciate all of you. But we got to wrap it up. I got my members-only stream happening in like 3 minutes. If you guys want to be a part of that, hit that join button down below, or you can actually join Subscribestar and be a part of the exclusive community over there. It's $5 a month, but you get exclusive content. You get some preparedness incentives. You also get the ability to message me directly, or even just hang out in the live chat. You can also just be a YouTube channel member to be in the chat as well. And it's just my way of saying thank you to those who want to support the channel directly. You don't miss out on any important intelligence or anything like that when it comes to being not being in the live chat, because it's not a requirement of being a supporter of the channel. Being here is already support enough, and I greatly appreciate that. If you want to hit the like button, you want to subscribe, you want to share this video with others in order to give more information out there, please feel free to do so. It does go to help support the channel. And I'll see all you members at the private chat. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.